Cricket's nice guys are up against the sport's most successful team. New Zealand and Australia are both targeting their first T20 world title. I'm Digvijay Singhdeo and this is Desert Storm, the final frontier. It's not the summit clash most of us would have predicted a month ago, but this is tournament play and the favourites were unable to hold their nerves in the crunch moment. We in India are completely neutral for this game, but not sure where the loyalties of our cricket guru lie. John Buchanan joins me from Brisbane. He coached Australia to 2 ODI world titles and also served as New Zealand's director of cricket. John, straight up, where do you stand?
Well, as you can see from the image behind me, Diggy, I guess I'm always loyal to home country, but it's going to be a close game, as you said.
Yes, and you know, John, one of the old cliches goes that this is a game of glorious uncertainties. I mean, no disrespect meant to you and your all-conquering Australian team, which is, I can see on that screen behind you. But in a sense, this is what the global game needed right now, a clash no one sort of expected.
Oh, yes, look, I think so, Diggy. I mean, I think in any sport, if all you do is see the favourites all the time, those who are predicted to win games or predicted to win tournaments, then I really think viewers, audiences, spectators, the game itself really become a little bit disappointed, a little bit blasé. They like to see the so-called underdogs come through, and in this case, both teams will be claiming that title, I would have thought.
Okay, we will get to our cricket guru to set up the game in more detail in just a bit. As we were talking, the ICC Men's T20 World Cup will crown a first-time champion tonight as Trans-Tasman rivals Australia and New Zealand lock horns in the final in Dubai. Neither of these two teams were considered title contenders at the start of the tournament, and yet both have defied the odds in an almost identical journey to get this far. Australia may have a record 5 ODI World Cups to their name, but the T20 crown has been a big miss in their trophy cabinet so far. Aaron Finch's side arrived in the UAE last month, having lost each of their last 5 bilateral series in the format. And yet the team put together 4 wins from 5 games in the tougher of the 2 groups before stunning one of the tournament favourites, Pakistan, in the semi-finals. Different players have delivered match-winning performances in different games, and it is at this stage of the tournament that Australia are at their most dangerous. They have only lost 3 of their 10 previous ICC finals and only 1 of 7 in the last 25 years.
Yeah, like you said, everyone had written us off, but we had a real lot of confidence within. We're really confident in the way that we were preparing, the way that our strategy was coming together. So, yeah, I think it hasn't defied expectation. I think we came here with a really clear plan to win the tournament, and we still feel as though we've got the squad to do that.
Now, New Zealand were more fancy than Australia at the beginning of the tournament, but not many backed them to reach the semis from a group containing 3 Asian teams, Pakistan, India and Afghanistan, who were all more familiar with the conditions in the UAE. But the Kiwis also won 4 of their 5 Super 12 matches, and they then beat the other title favourites, England, in the semis. It would be tempting to say that Kane Williamson's side have punched above their weight, but this is a heavyweight team that is now through to their 3rd consecutive ICC final and primed to add to the World Test Championship trophy they won earlier this year.
It is great to be here. Like I say, a reflection of a lot of hard work, but tomorrow's a one-off match, and for us it is trying to make those small adjustments again and keep the focus really close and what it needs to be, and the team's really looking forward to the occasion.
Australia and New Zealand are familiar foes with plenty of battles in recent years, and this is how the head-to-head record stacks up. Till the beginning of 2021, the Aussies had lost only 1 T20 international against the Kiwis, but this year New Zealand have won 3 out of 5 matches. However, Australia have a significant 12-4 head-to-head lead at ICC events, and the most astounding stat of all, Australia have played New Zealand 17 times in a tournament knockout match ODIs or T20s, and they've not been defeated even once. Let's get John Buchanan back in to set up this game in more detail. You know, John, there are some sporting records that have you completely shaking your head in disbelief. I remember Rafael Nadal hasn't lost a French Open final. The South Korean women's recurve archery team has always won gold at the Olympics. And as I just said, Australia have never lost a knockout game to New Zealand in cricket. Talk about putting the Kiwis under pressure.
Yes, well, I was very surprised when you read that figure out, 17 knockout games and Australia having not lost one of those. That's an amazing statistic. But again, as Kane Williamson just pointed out, like all these tournaments, this is now a one-off game. Whatever's happened in the past, whether that be this particular series, this particular tournament, or previously, that's all in the past. All they're worried about now is tomorrow's game or tonight's game, and both teams are primed for that.
Yes, John, the last time these two sides played, it was at the MCG in an ICC ODI final in 2015. New Zealand sort of consumed by the occasion. It was a massive drubbing. But do you get a feeling that this time it is the mighty Australians who start underdogs? Because the Kiwis have sort of gone ahead and become the most consistent team in world cricket across formats over the last, 2 to 3 years?
Yes, well, they have, haven't they? They've featured as champions across all formats in the last couple of years. But throughout this tournament, and I think the lead up into this tournament, they really played with a good sense of how to manoeuvre, manufacture wins, and as Kane Williamson was again saying, it's really down to the strategy that they use. And I think they're a very meticulous outfit always. They really plan well. Gary Stead, Shane Bond in the coaching mix will really have both batting and bowling outfits just exactly knowing what their roles are and how they'll deliver those against the Australian team. And therefore, I think, yes, I think they've got their nose in front, but it's only just.
Okay, at least you've conceded that. You said at the start that, you can look behind me and see where my loyalties lie, but at least you concede that they've got their noses slightly ahead. But there's another important detail to be addressed here. It's an obvious, if you look at what's happening in this tournament, if your luck isn't in as captain, you could lose the toss and then it's already sort of getting away from you. And that's what we've seen in this tournament in Dubai. You do feel for the teams defending, especially with the wickets completely sort of quickening up, it comes on much more better in the second half?
Yes, well, again, you talk about statistics, and the numbers really point very heavily to the team that is chasing, is the likely winning team. Not only in the tournament, but particularly in Dubai, where the game is tonight. So it does seem you win the toss, you definitely then exert the other team, and whatever total they reach, you do believe that you've got an opportunity to chase that down. We've just seen that through both semi-finals. It did seem that both Australia and New Zealand were out of the game, somewhere in about the 15th or 16th over of each match. But somehow, both teams, just through really strong batting and a knowledge of what they needed to do in those last 4 or 5 overs, were able to somehow sculpture a victory. And it does seem that sides really do these days enjoy knowing what the target is and then pacing themselves to get that victory.
But is that sort of a change that you've seen over the last few years? Or is that something that has been coming?
Well, T20, I think, is the format that has really brought that change about. I know that, that team you see behind us, that was the 2003 World Cup. And I know that whenever we reached finals, it was always a case, if we had the opportunity, we would like to bat first and post a total, because we always believed that runs on the board in a final was what counted. I mean, obviously you needed to put sufficient runs on the board in the first place, but that seemed to be the strategy. But these days, T20 cricket seems to have flipped that on its head, because teams understand no matter what that target seems, no matter how unlikely it seems, as we just saw, as I said before, in the 2 semi-finals, how unlikely that is, batsmen just believe that they can find not only boundaries but get the ball over the boundary therefore to reduce run rates down to manageable totals and get the sides home. So it's not the same bogey approach or bogeyman type approach as it was in the past. These days, I think it's certainly in T20 cricket flipped its head.
And clearly, John, they've been braver as well. Just trying to remember what Matthew Wade did to Shaheen Shah Afridi. But you know, you've been around dressing rooms ahead of high-pressure games. Justin Langer has been under considerable pressure. Earlier this year, there was results weren't that good, and then there was question, about his approach to management, that it was perhaps all-consuming. There were issues, but yet the fire in that Australian team has carried them here. How do you, as part of the coaching staff, settle the sort of butterflies inside the camp? And I ask this because Matthew Wade said this, that, heading into that semi-final, there were a lot of nerves, at least he had a lot of nerves.
Yes, look, often the semi-finals are the toughest game that you end up playing, simply because you've been through the tournament, somehow you've now qualified the top 4 teams leading into the chance then to go and play for the trophy. So your semi-finals are really a difficult time, and to settle the nerves, it's something that I guess coaches and the team really try to work on. It's still very much about getting your preparation right, making sure that each of the players believe that their preparation is as good as it can be, and then really discussing your game plan without necessarily going overboard, but generally understanding what your game plan is, so that more or less every person and then collectively feel that you've done as much as you possibly can to lead into the game, and then obviously it's about going out and playing that game, and hopefully you can execute. Now, you mentioned Matthew Wade. Matthew Wade, as we saw, joined. Who was he joined? Stoinis, of course, joining Stoinis, and again he had the great fortune to be dropped in that 19th over, and then proceeded to be really just courageous and creative and put the ball over the boundary. Yet on the other hand, Shaheen, who was again at the same stage, really had a chance missed, strove to actually execute a range of deliveries that normally he could probably do. And unfortunately, he couldn't execute where Wade did. So in the end, it's very much about players and being able to execute their skill right at the key moments.
Okay, this another, when you look at finals, you look at how you approach a final. You spoke about the approaches there as well. You also don't want to change a winning combination, but the Kiwis sort of been forced to do that due to Devon Conway's freak injury. Now, Team Seyfarth comes in, but what I want to ask you is, where does he bat in your book? Because his usual position at the top of the order is taken over by Daryl Mitchell. And do you think of that now, especially for this game?
Yes, look, I think it's a really big loss for New Zealand. As we said, it's one of the reasons why I think they've just got their nose in front, because Conway has been a key player to them through the tournament. He is a player that's quite adaptable and has been able to not only structure some very good innings for himself, but his ability to build partnerships beyond the likes of the Williamsons and the Guptills and the Mitchells and into that middle to lower order with Anisham or Asantna. That's been crucial to New Zealand's winning games. Now, he's not there. And again, as you say, you really, at this point in the tournament, you'd love to be able to go in with the side that you really want to play, and unfortunately he's not going to be there. So Seyfarth will come in. Seyfarth's a good little batsman. I think probably better batsman than he is a keeper. So from the perspective of skills, I'm not sure that they're going to miss too much. However, from the perspective of playing and being in the tournament, Seyfarth hasn't really been there. And so that's going to place some enormous pressure on him, and I see him possibly as a floater in their order. It just depends on where the game moves. They may move him up or down the order a little bit. So maybe bringing Santner in, maybe bringing Nisham in if things are going well, and hold him back. He is a good striker of the ball. He can find boundaries, but he just hasn't been in the tournament. So that's one that they're going to have to fiddle with through the game, and hopefully, find the right position for him to insert him into the game.
Okay, I'm just going to get you in on the Australian camp as well, you know, because John, the T20 format it's an extremely unpredictable one. We saw how Jimmy Neesham's cameo turned that England semi-final upside down, or as you mentioned, Marcus Stoinis' assault turned the momentum against Pakistan. Yet you look at solidity and you don't sort of see that in the Australian batting, you know. It's been patchy, sort of barring Warner and Finch. No one has crossed 100 runs in the tournament. Is that worrying for you?
Yes, it is. It definitely is. I think, again, we talked of Conway, then within that Australian lineup, someone like Warner, not only beginning to score runs, but when he's at the crease, he's building partnerships. So he has been, I think, involved in about 58% of the runs that Australia has scored. So they've relied very heavily on the top of their order. But they've now have Marsh in at number 3. Marsh has scored, just over 100 runs, but obviously hasn't played a lot. But their key worry is then what follows. Smith, Maxwell really haven't done the job for Australia at this point in time. And, if again, as New Zealand found themselves in their semi-final with the losses of their key players, can Australia, through Smith and Maxwell, resurrect an innings to put it in a position where they either put together a good score or they're in a position to chase down what has been set to them by New Zealand.
But isn't that also a sort of apprehension in the Kiwi camp could be on those lines? You just take the example of David Warner, down and out, dumped by his IPL franchise, but what a return to form. So the Kiwis could be thinking that, Smith and Maxwell haven't sort of done well, but you never know. This is something like what Adam Gilchrist did in 2007, that ODI final. You just sort of need one 15-ball period, and that could be the game.
Well, it's so true, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. But if a batsman of the calibre of a Warner or any of those players that we mentioned, Maxwell has always been seen to be, the big show, and if he manages to stay at the wicket for any length of time, he's very, very dangerous against any bowler, whether it be spin or pace, and can turn the game because, again, in T20 cricket, you've only got the 120 balls, and if a player can remain there for 15 balls or so, as we saw Neesham just do exactly that in that semi-final, which you mentioned, the game was gone, yet there he was. I think he put together 27 off 12 or 13 balls in the end. That's what can turn a game because, again, I think we said it last time, one ball is nearly 1% of a game, 1 in 120. So whether it's 6, 4, 1, 2, 3, dot, wicket, wide, it really impacts on the outcome of a game.
Okay. John, I was going through your piece on our website, wionnews.com, and you were comparing the two bowling attacks. There's 22 wickets for the Australian Pacers and 22 for the New Zealand trio if we leave out Jimmy Neesham. But what you were pointing out, that it's their control and economy through the tournament that sort of differentiates both these attacks. And when you're going into a big match like a final, that's what you expect, control and sort of, just restrict the runs.
Yeah, totally. There's no doubt that what restricts any side is taking wickets, and both pace attacks seem to be reasonably evenly balanced in their ability to strike. However, when you combine that with the ability to restrict scoring at the same stage, you become a very lethal bowling force, and that's what New Zealand have got. Their quick bowlers, I think, overall runs per over is around about 6.5, whereas the Australian trio is averaging about 8.2 or 8.3. So that's a pretty significant difference, again, over the course of just a 20-over game. So Australia, their control, their ability to restrict the opposition batsman is certainly somewhat lagging behind the New Zealand trio.
Okay, when you talk of an Australia-New Zealand game, you think, all-rounders getting wickets, or you think of perhaps the Pacers running through the top order. But, just looking at the way this one's shaping up and especially the conditions, an Australia-New Zealand game could be impacted by the spinners. We saw the Aussies struggle against Shadab Khan. They tried to, hit him out of the attack, but then he ended up with 4 wickets. And then here you have Ish Sodhi and Mitchell Santner as well for New Zealand, and those 8 overs from them, they could be very key.
They will be. I again use an Indian statistician, Krishna Tunga from All That Cricket, and he points out to me that in Dubai, the spinners are really the danger force in Dubai itself through the course of this T20 tournament. And when we therefore look at both sides, Sodhi definitely leading the charge from New Zealand's point of view, having picked up, I think, somewhere around 8 or 9 wickets at 20. And Zampa, though, from Australia, I think has been one of the outstanding bowlers of the tournament. You mentioned a couple of the others, Shadab, Hasrasanga from Sri Lanka. You know, the wrist spin is one of the finds, if you like, of how this tournament's unfolded. Nonetheless, Zampa, not a big spinner of the ball, but a short in stature, and therefore the ball skids. He's got great control at the moment, and generally he gets inserted into the game around about that 8th over, you know, bowls 8, 10, 12, 14, up to 16 somewhere, and has picked up, he's picked up 12 wickets at 5.7, and his economy rates at 10.9. His economy rate's 5.7. So he is really where the game might be won or lost for both sides. If New Zealand can stay on top of Zampa, not allow him into the game, continue to score runs from him, that's a key component of Australia's strategy in terms of either restricting New Zealand's total or winning the game.
Okay, and just on that, you know, I was looking at numbers, and since you've been quoting numbers at me, I thought I'll just do some research as well. Kane Williamson has been scoring at around 95 in a T20 international tournament. 95 means, you know, it's something you don't expect at all. But could he be key? Could the plan be that see off Zampa's 4-over spell? He's the man with Devon Conway, who plays spin very well, being out. Get Williamson to see off the Zampa threat, and then perhaps maximize in the 4 overs that are going to be bowled by Maxwell, Mitchell Marsh and Marcus Stoinis.
Yes, well, again, I think Williamson is a really fine player, and he's definitely played a so-called anchor role. Yes, his strike rate is not high, yet probably his rotation rate is reasonably good, and he certainly has allowed the likes of Mitchell to be a lot freer in his stroke making, and then certainly below him or near him, Conway, and then someone like Neesham. So in this game, I think he's going to have to step up. His job will be to bat deeper into the innings. And of course, at the moment, if we see Williamson, I think, go into the 16th, 17th, 18th over, he is an inventive little player. And sometimes, as we saw in the last game, his invention just didn't come off and he was out early. But he does have the ability to step his game up or become far more adaptable, flexible, creative as his innings unfold. So, again, you mentioned key player, very important to New Zealand, but again, they just demonstrated that they're just not reliant upon 1 or 2, possibly 3 players. They can bat a long way down.
Okay, you know, John, usually we end this with a prediction. I'm not going to ask you to do a prediction. I'll perhaps ask you, rephrase it, and ask you to tell us where do you think this game is going to be won?
I think, like all games, it's really that power play overs that set a game up. You know, having said that, obviously Pakistan the other night, none for 47 in their 6, gave themselves a really good platform to build the total. But I still see that whoever can really dominate that power play, whether it be by runs, whether it be by taking wickets, or whether it be by actually restricting the total of a batting side, I just see that's your launch pad. That's the place where you do set your innings up to either set a big total or chase one down. And possibly, you know, if Australia or whoever bats first can get to the 50-odd mark with 1 down, possibly 2 down, then they're in with a good show of setting a big total. So that to me is where it's won or lost. However, games are going, you know, to the 19th and 20th over now. So we tend to see, as the games are going to that point in the match, that it is that 18th, 19th, 20th over, whomever has to deliver those. The bowling side has to be so accurate with their skill delivery, otherwise the batting side gets away from them and takes the game away.
Okay, hopefully the dew stays away. And on that note, it's time to say thank you to John Buchanan here. John, we're hoping we get a good final that, as you said, goes down to the 19th or the 20th over. It'll probably keep you up a bit more longer than you would have expected. But enjoy the game.
Yeah, we will do. Thanks, Diggy, and I hope it does too. I hope it goes to the 20th over. Let's go for a super over. What do you reckon about that? I'd stay up and watch that one. Let's get a super over in and see where we go from there.
A super over, Australia versus New Zealand. No England involved here, so let's see how that pans out. A programming reminder that John Buchanan will join us after the game to review the ICC Men's T20 World Cup final. Remember, we will be celebrating a new champion.